I went to a symposium of architectural design in Finland, and Aalto was a major speaker there, and the whole of Finnish, you know, Finland, the countryside, the landscape, the buildings, they had something about it that there was a maturity that it didn't hit you as being something spectacular, but after 3 or 4 days you suddenly felt, gee, this has just got a quality about it, a quiet quality, and it really impressed me.
Now, so Walter Burley Griffin and Robin Dodds are undoubtedly great architects, and I think that Robin Dodds was obviously appreciated by his clients more than poor Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Marnie had to put up with the most intolerable climate in Australia.
And I think it was good having Jim Burrell here, and Jim Burrell with his partner Lauren Cully, and who kept in the background, and I don't think many people met him, but he was a big force in the quality of Jim's design work. You get that, I think, with practices where you get two architects, different strengths, but together they do a product.
I was always attracted to Hayes and Scott domestic work. It's something that just ran through, and you could tell it as a glance, and it wasn't as hard as a great big monument. It was just something that fitted in very nicely.
Hayes and Scott houses were just as good as you find anywhere in the country. You know, they were sort of like a, to me as a young architect coming through, they were a beacon. They were as good as you could get.
There was a consistency in their work, and it did fit into the landscape, and it was the use of materials was restrained.
Yeah. Hayes and Scott were certainly in that category in terms of houses. John Dalton was the coolest thing around. It was traditional for the students to have their conference at the same time as the Institute conference in the same city. So that's what tended to happen, but the students tried to have an alternative venue with better speakers and better events, and they got to be pretty good. So you wouldn't miss them. In fact, we had one in Brisbane that was had speakers like Tony Graham came out. He wasn't part of Archigram, but he was out of Britain at the time of Archigram. We had the editor of Domus, who was Gio Conti. He came to Brisbane and talked to students. There was a Dutch architect called Bakema who came out as well. And people like this you wouldn't miss. I can remember that Philip Cox spoke at that conference too about his new tennis centre in Sydney. And after the Buckminster Fuller had been going on about how much buildings weigh, that was the way you should assess a good building, how much it weighed, because buildings should be light, using little resources. And so after Philip Cox gave his talk about his reinforced concrete building, I asked him in question time, how much did it weigh? And I thought that was a ridiculous question.
speak next. I'm not sure. But it always looked as though it had an architect design it. It was more international than Torbreck. It was crisp, cool, calm and collected, which is all you'd expect from clarinet and cello.
They had a competition in the office, and Keith Frost, who was a bit of a loner, had drawn up the most magnificent perspective. It must have been about that big by that big, of this in pencil, of this, his idea of the building. And anyhow, Mr. Gargett said, well, we'll go down and see the State Treasurer and we'll show him the results of this competition. I think there might have been somebody else as well. So he'd take everybody down and we met the Treasurer. He was a very approachable man, and but I could see immediately he couldn't take his eyes off Keith's drawing, and nor could I, because it was superb. And of course that's the building that's there now. What Keith came up with, precast concrete, exposed aggregate, which looking back now was, that was like a very popular move in Brisbane at that time. This is 1969, 1970, and we became tenants on the 21st floor in 72. And however, he had put them outside as sun control, and you had the impression inside that it was completely open, the windows full length, sills reasonably low, so you had a marvellous view both ways. And the sun control meant the sun never hit your drawing boards. You could see the office was completely open plan. It was an intimate theatre. It was like no other theatre we'd ever been in Brisbane. Somebody told me that there was another one similar, which I don't know what it was. In other words, it was clad with very finely pierced metal. The ceiling was like a series of scales in a sort of dome-like shape, so that you weren't, it wasn't distracting, but behind that any sort of acoustics could be arranged so that you could have orchestral music, you could have theatre, a human voice, so on, all totally different acoustics. So, and then just moving in to the seating, they were tapered, so you didn't have to go tightly in front of people's knees. It was an easy place to get into. It was wonderfully close to the stage, and I thought it was marvellous.
Were the architects for Gatton College at that time, and I got to design this exhibition stand, which was all made out of corrugated iron, curved corrugated iron, and to try and encourage people to want to go and study agriculture at Gatton.
I think they were good buildings because they were student orientated. In other words, they were robust. From a construction point of view, they got the most value from you know, their investment. And they felt good. They felt good as a complex. Each one had was you know, designed for its particular use, like for the piggery and the poultry breeding sheds and things we'd never even done, like an intensive minimal disease piggery that we did there. Was used as a model in the agricultural pastoral world, and it was a reference place in the country.
The Kindler Theatre at the QRT, I was in a meeting and it was suggested that I was meeting with Don Fraser, who was the director at the time, that you know, perhaps you could look at this project from a theatre. And I sketched it there and then as to what it could be. And it led to me having a reputation in education. It really opened up a gate to a lot more work. Griffith University, I was one of the 3 initial architects chosen for the campus by Roger Johnson, who was the university architect, who was a person I respected enormously. What we agreed on was the materials that we'd use, so that there'd be some consistency in the campus in that respect. But the buildings that we designed were completely different in their function. Robin Gibson's building was the Humanities building, and the central offices and central lecture theatres. John Dalton was the sort of refectory type buildings, and I did the science buildings.
It was a fashionable approach in a way, you know, architects exploring new materials, and Robin Gibson had done, you know, there's like that lovely concrete work at the art gallery, and it seemed to be used in a few buildings from there, and Jim Birrell had used it in the car park. You can see from the outside that the windows are offset in the panels, and that was to try and get the windows protected from the western sun, so they hugged the northwestern thing behind a fin of concrete, and then to get the depth and to get around the structure, then they splay out. They splay out as a sill and they splay out as a side. So that, and we're able to get precast units done, and the process of precasting had not recently, but it had come into Brisbane, and it was pretty, you know, it was accepted, and you could arrange that.
I had occasionally a few problems to try and fit these buildings in these Anglican schools to the plans, because especially with laboratories, they were specific size, but I found that by putting them under a great big roof with exterior columns and then using that as a sort of outer screen, you could do almost anything with the plan. And I suddenly realised that the Australian or the Queensland character was really a big roof sheltering, which cast a shadow underneath, which was the veranda. And it seemed then, by the time the floor also cast a shadow, that that building was floating in a wide landscape. And then I realised it was a phenomenon that should be exploited in architecture.
The Almaco service stations came about which was Amico, I think, in the United States. Anyway, they're opening their new thing here, starting in Queensland. And the thing about it was that they wanted us to come up with an appropriate design for Queensland, and which would make its mark and make a statement. So we came up with this big canopy, and it was sort of a straightforward, crisp glass to the office, and we even sort of came about not inventing a new material, but for the fascias. They were a glazed metal fascias, which was a product that wasn't readily available. And so we got this one because we wanted bright colour, and which was the red and the blue of Amico and the white. We wanted the bright colour and able to withstand the weather. So these glazed paints, baked enamel finishes were used.
One of the little buildings that I helped detail was the Archbishop's Chapel at Bishopsbourne in Hamilton, which was a very Frank Lloyd Wright building, and that was designed by Graham Peterkin, who idolised Frank Lloyd Wright, and this was his chance to do something. So anyway, I got to design the furniture in it, the altar and chair, I think, and a few bits and pieces.
The Neil house was, I think it was almost the first house I did when I came back from working in Europe. It was an interesting place because it expressed the timber frame. It had cell-cured timber framing, which was on a hardwood, which was expressed as a post and beam sort of expression, and then the asbestos cement or fibre cement or whatever it was at the time, then be painted white, and it had a Japanese sort of feel. It had broad eaves. It didn't get up and make a statement, but it was a gentle sort of simple, crisp house, Brisbane-y sort of house. It didn't look like a Sydney or a Melbourne house.
Well, we're friends with Jennifer Bloxage, and she was the director of the theatre. And they bought this site that had 2 or 3 houses on it, and we gutted one of the houses and put seats around the perimeter, and that became the original White Theatre. And then I think a government grant was offered or obtained, and I can remember sitting on the footpath on the gutter with Jennifer, drawing in the dust in the gutter what form this theatre ought to take. That was how it started. I like brick as a material that you used with your hand, and that was it. And you just went on with the next one, and the best sort of brickwork didn't have to be very precise bricks, it just had to be bricks.
In a way we're like sculptors, only we're using different techniques.